Hey guys, for my library assignment, I decided to read a graphic novel of a movie series that's near and dear to my heart. Mad Max Fury Road. The graphic novel from Mad Max is the most recent addition to a series that's been going on since 1979. The original Mad Max, played by the amazing and insane Mel Gibson, was a little slow in the action, focused more on dramatic storytelling. However, when it comes to the most recent installment of the film, there's no shortage of action. Now, the graphic novel associated with Mad Max Fury Road takes these two ideas and seems to mesh them, action with drama. The book isn't a true graphic novel in that it's not a singular story told in a comic form, but instead several short stories compiled into one book. It tells the backstories of Furiosa, Nux, Immortan Joe and his allies, the Bullet Farmer and the People Eater, the story of the War Rig, and finally, Max Rockatansky himself. Let's nail down some of the gritty details so that I actually get credit for this assignment. The book is 75 pages, written by Nico Lathouris, Mark Sexton, and the original writer and director of all the Mad Max movies, George Miller. George Miller, who, fun fact, gave us this.
Ram you, to your breed, your fleece, your clan be true.
And this.
I just need your body, baby. From dusk till dawn.
Yeah, that guy gave us this. Thanks, George. The graphic novel features artists Lee Bermejo, Ricardo Burcelli, Leandro Fernandez, and Tristan Jones. Cover arts by Tommy Lee Edwards. Letterers Clem Robbins. Colorist is Michael Spicer. And the editor is Alex Antoine. Weird name. Hard to say. It's published by Vertigo, which means now we can move on to the fun bit. So let's start where the comic starts, shall we? With Nux.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
In the movie, Nux is the fanatical and lovable war boy who serves Immortan Joe. As we watch him develop in the movie, he grows into a memorable side protagonist with Max and Furiosa. But in his section of the graphic novel, we get to see a young Nux lose his parents and fight his way up the elevator into the Citadel. We see Nux grow up among the war boys, grow in his faith for the Immortan, and fight his way into being a driver. All in all, it's a bit short and not as fulfilling as I'd like, but it's cool to see who Nux was before the film starts, and he's exactly who you'd expect. Another average grunt working for the main antagonist. Speaking of which...
Annihilated!
You will ride eternal, shining and chrome.
Immortan Joe, the disgusting and terrifying warlord who commands an army of just sort of angry Australian dudes. This story is pretty satisfying. We get to see who Joe was before the apocalypse, a hardened military leader riding with an outlaw pack of bikers. The story has the most meat of any of the ones featured in this compilation. Joe's story is compelling and interesting and tells us how a man can grow and also devolve and come to see himself not just as a king, but as a god. Joe is something more than human because he believes he's more than human, and the people around him believe it as well. Joe compiles a small army and single-handedly takes out the Citadel for himself. He installs his new generals and allies in nearby settlements, one in a mine they lovingly dub the Bullet Farm, and another in an oil refinery led by the People Eater. This guy, like, the grossest guy around. Joe doesn't build himself as a leader of a settlement or army. He sets himself up as a king, ruling a kingdom, and commands loyalty from his lords and imperators. Imperators such as...
Don't breathe.
Furiosa. I found this segment to be the most disappointing of all. Furiosa is arguably the main character in the Fury Road movie, stealing the spotlight even from Max himself. She's powerful and strong-willed, and I really wanted to know more about her past. However, her portion of the story revolves more around her relationship with Joe's wives than it does Furiosa herself. I suppose the two stories are interconnected, but I really wanted to know why she's such a badass and why Joe trusts her with the war rig. Not so much about how she made friends with his slaves. I mean, I guess it's central to understanding the movie, but I really wanted more meat about the character itself. She doesn't have any major changes. She just sort of is this tough, silent guard and takes pity on the girls. It's unfulfilling, but let's talk about the war rig.
You fell! You traitor!
This big beast is such a cool sight on scene. The imposing presence, the roar of its twin engines, and that horn. This thing just screams badass, and it's driven by a one-armed woman, which has always said a lot to me about Furiosa herself. This is the tale of how the war rig was made, from the meager start by two insane twin mechanics, to the family who hid out in the semi-truck shell to hide from the apocalypse, to the skulls stacked on the grill and the VW bug that serves as a turret bunker. We get to know the history of the war rig right down to her bones. And for those of us that have a value in world building like me, this is super cool. But let's set aside that for a moment and move on to our title character.
My name is Max. My world is fire and blood.
So once again, Max's story starts with him needing to rebuild the Interceptor. He's at Gastown trying to run a V8 motor in the Thunderdome, which I have to say thanks to the writers for bringing back that little bit of nostalgia. Max wins with a little bit of help naturally and goes to rebuild his car. Here's the funny thing about Max as a character. He never grows. He never changes. In the first movie, Max is a cop, sure, and he's a pretty normal, sane dude, but when Toe Cutter kills his family, Max just loses his mind. Another fun fact, Toe Cutter, the main villain from the original Mad Max movie, is played by Hugh Case Byrne. Byrne? I don't know. And that actor also played Immortan Joe. So this one rad guy plays the main villain in 2 out of the 4 Mad Max movies, and that's pretty cool. Or, maybe it's really scary. But back to the point. Max is stoic, silent, removed from the problems of the people, and goes out of his way to be alone. And in the comic, there's no exception. Max kills bad guys, saves little girls, rebuilds his car, and proceeds to be a completely removed badass, and then just disappears. Max's story in the graphic novel is pure Max, the same Max that I grew up loving. So that's the book. Pretty straightforward Mad Max goodness. It's hard to say if I would recommend this to my classmates, as I don't really know any of your tastes. I don't really know any of you. If you are like me and you have a deep love for Mad Max, and especially Fury Road, I definitely suggest checking it out. If you aren't familiar with it already, I would say this book isn't about to make you fall in love with the series. Would I recommend this to my friends? Definitely, but my friends are all pretty serious Mad Max fans, so I probably don't have to. So that's it. Mad Max, Fury Road. Read it. Or don't. Live your dreams and ride eternal, shiny and chrome.